Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. My name is Mark Aylward, and I'm here with my friend and colleague Jim Gurley. And yeah, we talk about stuff that has to do with our lives. And I think our audience, Jim, has kind of evolved into predominantly male. You know, women are welcome. And I suppose women have things they want to talk about that affect their men's lives. But we keep coming back to this, somebody in the area of maybe 30 to 70 or so. It's a big area, but when life starts happening to you and you start adulting, I think the idea for this episode is to talk about self-identity. And I think who you are in your own head, talking to yourself, and who you are if someone were to ask you, what do you do, or who are you? And I do a lot of work in this area, and I know you do too, Jim. But I think the topic of self-identity, to connect it to the wheel, right in the middle is the self, and then moving out from there is the five areas of life. I can let you run around the wheel, but self-identity in the context of, who are you? What do you do? And interestingly, Jim, you just went to a conference where there was an exercise that you took part in that kind of allowed you to practice the answer to that question. I found that story to be interesting. Share that with us if you would.
Yeah, Mark, like you said, every time we do an episode, it always circles back to self-awareness, and then the wheel, these five areas of our life, and then our self library. So today, it looks like it's going to focus on self-identity, and that came from an event that I hosted last week. This is with the National Kitchen and Bath Association, and the gal that was hosting the event, it was a large event, 75 people or something, and she came up with this concept called it's a speed dating concept. And what it is everybody sits down, and it's you have a script, and there's like 5 or 6 questions, and you have like 5 minutes to answer the questions, and then you shift that, so everybody moves. So it's a big long table, chairs are lined up both sides of the table. You one person that you have a script, you answer the questions, and then it moves again, and that goes on for hours. So it was fun. It was fun on a lot of levels, because one, you get to know people in ways that you would have never had the ability to interact with them, right? It's a networking meeting, so that was a great way. And then it was also one of the rare opportunities, and I'm speaking for myself now, that I was able to listen to myself and then practice my answer when somebody asks you. It's probably one of the most dreaded questions, depending on where you're at in life. What do you do? Because that was
Mm-hmm.
question number one. What do you do?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll go through the other ones. But the main was, what do you do? And I changed it up. I think a lot of people did,
Mm-hmm.
as the first time versus the second time, and then how about the fifth time? And so I started to get really comfortable with, what do you do? Well, and then I would say, well, I have 5 different projects, so I do a lot of things. But I only had 4 minutes, right? So I had to get something out of my mouth. And for the first time, I practiced a couple ones, and what was, well, I do a weekly podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And the question was, well, if you do a weekly podcast, what's the name of it? Right? Well, it's called the Imperfect Men's Club. And then what do you talk about? And then, of course, talk about it. So that went over very well, but I got to practice that, and everybody was very interested in that. I think we got a few listeners that night, a few new listeners.
That's cool.
Um, yeah, it was really cool. And then I would have to go through my other projects and explain those, or let's just say articulate those very quickly, so somebody can understand. Wow, that's interesting. That's interesting. And I think the other takeaway from that whole night was, here's a couple other high level questions, and then we can always circle back to this. But one was, what was the best advice you ever received from somebody?
Mm-hmm.
So that, and hearing people's uh, answer to that, my advice, the best advice that I stayed with, the same story, was years ago. I was representing this factory, and the guy was very wealthy. He had some beautiful home. He had built quite a business. And I remember because I was younger and he was quite a bit older, and he said, "You know, Jim, in life, people often ask me about life, and my advice to them is, uh, water your own grass." And it
Mm.
comes from that thing that the grass always looks greener. So, um, but my and it's true, water your own grass. So that was one of them, and then I said that like 20 times. Everybody loved that one. Water your own
Yeah, yeah,
grass,
that's
right?
good. I've never heard that before, but I like it.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
like it.
So
It makes you think. I
it
think
does
the
make you think, and it makes you pick the ones that people responded to the best. What was the other ones? I don't know. I was really surprised to hear the how one of the questions, if you could do anything, what would it be? And most people were happy. Most people were doing what they wanted to do. I was very
yeah,
surprised to hear that.
interesting.
Yeah,
Well, it's
yeah,
what my perspective on that is interesting because you know very well what I've spent my life doing and helping people find work or get a better job or a promotion or anything in that career transition space. That's where I start. That's where I
hmm
start is like, let's talk about who you are.
hmm hmm
What do you do? Who are you? Maybe why do you do what you do?
hmm
My experience is most people are not content with what they're doing, and maybe in that setting, people are more inclined to pretend everything's okay, maybe with strangers.
yes, yes. And again, this was a business function, so very different than, people come to you when they're in a lot of pain, right? When they don't
Yeah,
have a
yeah,
job.
yeah,
Everybody at this function had a job,
yeah,
and
yeah. Well, that's
they were, yeah,
it's interesting. Then it logically follows that how we answer that question also depends on where we are in life, right?
yes,
So
yes,
you're doing the same stuff, but you feel differently about what you're doing. My
yeah,
experience, and the other interesting angle on this is what happens when you ask yourself that question.
hmm
And what kind of self-talk do you do?
yeah,
Are you feeling confident? Are you feeling hopeful? Are you feeling positive, or are you beating the shit out of yourself, which is
yeah,
quite common,
yeah,
So, my experience with that is I really can't start my relationship with a client unless we really kind of have that conversation. And to your point earlier in our conversation, I find most people can't answer that question without grimacing and having a lot of thoughts and confusion and don't know where to start. And what do you mean? What do I do? I do lots of different things. It's really interesting how people, or the flip side in my experience is they'll say something to me that doesn't mean anything, like I'm a director or
yeah,
I'm a manager.
yeah,
Like, well, if you're a director, are you directing a film or are you directing a group of people? And if you're
yeah,
directing a group of people, how many people are in that group? Is it 200 people or is it three?
yeah,
It's like nobody provides context in my experience
yeah,
unless you try and extract the context out. Like my questions are
yeah,
always, what does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? What is it? Why?
mhm,
And it's the same.
yeah,
I don't recall ever having someone just very easily, calmly, and concisely answering that question where I could say, okay, very clear to me what you do. It's
yeah,
never the case, almost never the case.
yeah. Well, that's what was kind of cool about the exercise, because it was you were on a running clock. You only had so many seconds, and it was fun. People were laughing, right? Because you were moving around, and it wasn't as if it was super serious. And I think that's what changed it, because uh, of course you were being judged, but you didn't have time, and you'd fumble, and it didn't matter because you just move on and try it again to
Mm-hmm.
somebody else.
Yep.
And typically when somebody asks you, depending on who it is, it's because they're attempting to judge you, and they will judge you based on what you say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's we all do this, so that's not a criticism from one side to the other. But again, the fact that there was a running clock, I had to be better at describing what I do. And like in my case, well, actually, let's just try it on each other, right? This would be kind of fun, right? Because uh you never know until you try it. But so my line would be, okay, so what do you do? I said, well, I actually do, first of all, I didn't this is I'm off topic a little bit. Before the event talk, it was a network event, so we're just talking to people, and people ask, well, what do you do? And I says, are you asking what I do for money, or what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
Because that is different. And that's and I do that kind of for myself, kind of transparency. uh, but the assumption is whatever you do is directly related to the money. Not always the case, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of situations where that's not the case. Like right now, we're doing this podcast. We're not being compensated for this, so you can't say this is a profession.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's so that yeah.
No, it's an interesting question, and I've been, I'm trying to get on a lot of other podcasts as a guest and kind of putting myself out there on LinkedIn and creating a bunch of content and video and written word stuff. And so when you engage with someone else, they typically will ask, can you send along a bio?
Yeah.
And that's like it's a frightening question. It's
Yeah.
like it's like a bio. I should have one of the. I mean, I've been around for a long time doing the same shit. I should have that bio on the tip of my tongue, and that's my profession, is teaching people how to do it. And it still like frightens me when they ask me for it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, where am I going to go to get? Which one do I want to give them?
Well, Mark, you'll like this. So for the first time in my life, my bio was I had to include the podcast because I said that we just finished our fifth. I do a weekly podcast. Uh, we just finished our 60th episode yesterday because that was Thursday. We record on Wednesdays. Uh, that's a big part of my life now. So for the
Yeah.
first time, I'm introducing myself as a podcaster, because if you do 60 of anything, it's not just a hobby anymore, right? It's evolved to the next level. And
Yeah, and we can both feel like we agree that we're getting better at it. We're having more fun with it. It's getting more.
I'm glad you mentioned it. I do think
Yeah.
there was a level of confidence because we had, we got some feedback, but it's become part of who I am. So when I introduce myself for the first time, I'm saying, well, I'm a podcaster. I do a weekly podcaster, right? What does that make? Do I make millions of dollars doing it? No, but I guess you could say it's a profession since you do it every week, right?
Yeah, I like to think of things like that in terms of being complementary to the other things that I do.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
try to be. I think this you've alluded to it on a number of occasions. The stuff that we're doing has made you a better public speaker. It's
Yeah.
made you a better conversationalist. It's opened your eyes and your mind about
Yeah.
talking about topics that you were initially reticent to talk about.
Yeah.
That's what I see from my angle, from
Yeah.
looking at you.
Yeah.
I'm thinking you.
Well, I heard something again. This was uh, some time ago that I heard the description as you get to a certain point in life where you do projects. You don't look at it as a job. You do the same thing, right? You have a consulting. That's a project.
Mhm.
Now, sure, some of them you're compensated for, some you don't. But to your point, Mark, they kind of eventually fit together. So that was I got pretty good at saying, well, I have 5 different projects.
Yep.
Which one would you like to hear about?
Yep. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and then I would go on describing the projects. And
Yeah.
yeah,
It's interesting. The more I think about what I do, I think I gravitate towards the word teacher. Other words come up like advisor or agent or coach and trainer, or, they're all relevant. I suppose there's nuanceful differences between those words, but I take the wisdom I've gained for 30 years of helping people find work or becoming
okay, let's
more.
go then. Let's
Yeah.
do a round and we'll go back and forth. We'll have fun with it. So I'll go first. What do you do, Mark? And again, this is a running clock, so you've got like 30 seconds.
Yeah, I've basically spent my entire life helping people find better work, and people in different situations that are seeking some sort of progress and career transition. And I coach them up. I used to do that as a recruiter, and then I started my own business, and now I'm coaching in that space. But it's all professional development work,
So you're a career coach,
among other things. Yeah.
right? So then your answer would be, I do multiple things. One of them is career coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I
that
would say.
again, if we were coaching each other up and I'll go, you can critique me. Yeah. Then you would say, yeah, I'm a career coach. I have a number of projects. One of the things I do is career coaching. That's my core background or everything. And that's ultimately what I started to say too, because what I do now is not what I did for the majority of my life. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, although because I do some consulting and I represented factories for over 25 years. Um, and now what I find myself doing is representing business owners as their agent. I was always played an agent role, But as that evolved, you started to realize that um, the agency role applies to humans as much as it does for companies. And this kind of goes back to our core subject today, and that's their self identity. Pulling that out of them, getting them comfortable with how to articulate that to the world, but even more importantly to themselves. And
Yeah, I think it's. I also think, and maybe my perspective is askew because of my background, but I also think anyone who you can trust and that loves you and respects you is probably going to be effective at helping you with this, because the objectivity is the most important perspective. That's the thing that is most difficult for people to give themselves,
yeah,
right? I believe that I have pretty strong inner critic, and self-doubt emerges pretty consistently. Maybe that's everybody. I don't know. But if sometimes it feels like I'm the only one that's down on myself, and then all you got to do is bring that topic up, and the person you're
yeah. I
talking to
also
will
think
say,
it also says who asks the question. It's not just how you answer the question, who's
"Yep,
asking the question.
yep,
And I would say that that gets modified dramatically depending on who's answering the question. In this
nope,
case, I have a role, so they kind of already know who I am, and it's all related business, right? It was a B2B event, and so it was easier to kind of answer the question related to
yeah."
that
That's a
track.
really interesting format to kick off a networking event. That really gets the conversation started.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
to your point, when you hear a lot of laughter, things are going smoothly. It's effective. Yeah, I think like I said to you before, if someone comes to me in need of my help, chances are they're unhappy about something. It could
Mhm.
be their boss, it could be the amount of money they make, it could be they're sick of the work, they're not challenged anymore, or there's a cultural misalignment. It could be a number of different things. Sometimes it's just a life event that changed, like they got a divorce, or somebody got sick. But it always starts with this self identity exercise. And I remember asking my girlfriend's daughter 5 years ago. She needed my help, and we were just now, or we were early on in the relationship, so I hadn't met her yet. I didn't know what she was talking about when we had met at a restaurant. And I said, "Well, tell me what's going on." And she told me, and then I said, "Well, what do you do?" And she said, "I'm a store manager." And I said, "What does that mean?" And I took her down that, what does that mean? I
Mhm.
must have said it 7 or 8 times. And I finally said to her, "So the system that you use to get the products sold, invoices sent out, money collected, the whole purchasing system connected to the inventory system, did you inherit that system, or you were part of the team that designed that system?" And she lit up like a Christmas tree and said, "Oh no, that was my favorite part,
Mhm.
the designing of the system, not the use
Yeah.
of the system after the fact." And so I decided, well, we just have to find a store that's in a similar line selling similar type products that doesn't have a system built yet, and you can go in and be the person that helps them build their system.
Mhm.
And it was just all these bells and whistles started going off. And it was like a couple of weeks later, she had a better job for more money in doing exactly that. So this
Mhm.
exercise of getting someone to really wrap their arms around who they are and what they
Mhm.
do, until you start talking about it, it would seem, most people, I think, and this is just my perspective, most people, I think, well, it's my story, so I can tell it anytime somebody wants to hear it. I don't have to
Mhm.
practice that. But once you start practicing it, and you fall over and over, and you put your foot in your mouth and you misspeak and you
Yep.
struggle to find a word, you very quickly come to the conclusion, maybe this is something I should spend a little time on, because I don't want to say that
Yeah.
when I'm talking to that guy, you
Yeah.
know?
There's no question. You mentioned that earlier that people are really bad at telling their own stories. And so, what advice would you have? I guess maybe um, my advice would be have somebody obviously that you trust enough that you can talk through these because there's layers to it. And then again, I'm a big believer in everyone needs an agent. An agent is somebody that sees your value to the market greater than you do because you're too close to it. These things are very personal. They're very sometimes emotional, and the market doesn't really care. The market wants to know what value it has. And
Mhm.
so a third party, especially somebody that is taking the time to really understand who you are and what you do, like as you did with your girlfriend's daughter, can make a big difference. But I don't think the average person does it. I really don't. It's
No
I guess
question.
what do you
No.
call it? Career coaching, or I don't know who does that. You maybe your
Well,
friend.
yeah.
Probably the worst person to do that would be a friend, a close friend or family member, especially your mother or your
Well, I think,
girlfriend.
some people don't have many choices. Some people might have to, is I think as long as you trust them and that they love you, I think that anybody that fits those two things can be helpful. I think you also have to understand, because context is a big part of this for me. Context is a big part of everything for me. I think we all operate
Yes.
without enough context too often.
Yeah.
But I would say if it's your mom, because that's your only option. She's right there across the table from you. No one else is around, and I need a feedback from somebody sooner than later, or whatever the scenario might be. Then I think it's beholden of you to go, okay, well, I have to remind myself of what my mother's biases are and what my mother's filters are, so that I can accept her criticism with that context. That then you're kind of exercising control over the communication. You're going to get more help from her, because you're going to be able to say, no, she's biased towards, entrepreneurship, or she's biased towards working for a big company and job security, which is a myth. It doesn't exist. So I'm going to interpret her critique if that's the only person I have available. But I think ideally it would be someone like you or me, somebody that kind of does this for a living, and somebody that you're paying, because
Interesting.
then you have skin in the game. Paying
Hmm.
someone is very different than getting something for free. So
Yeah.
those are all kind of
That's actually good advice on a number of levels, Ron. But by the way, I kind of disagree with you. I think the worst person to get advice from would be your 80-year-old mother, or
oh,
depending.
I didn't say it was the best
Yeah.
person to get advice from. I'm
But
just
if that
saying
was your only
somebody's
option, I'd still would pass on that one. I really would. I'd just pass and wait for the next person to come along because and again, part of that's just being a mom. Of course, she's going to say anything to make you feel good or whatever else. So
keep you safe.
and
Yeah.
I even say that, I mean, about good friends. They know as you are. I think really important what you said, Mark, and that's context. Context. What everything we're talking about really is, how do you describe what you do? Now you can describe what you do, especially in our framework. Our profession is the leader always. That's, as a man, that's typically we're going to lead with our profession, right? It's
Mhm.
not that we don't do other things, but it's going to be our profession. So we've got to get really comfortable on how we're going to describe what that is. Even, like you said, it's not a title. You're not a manager, but you're a logistics person for the freight industry, or whatever. I think if you're going to describe what you do, get really really clear on what that could be, where you can convey that very quickly to somebody, and then like every elevator pitch, just enough so they're interested to want to hear more. And
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
whatever that is, try to get that out in the very beginning with some confidence, with a tone, and with some certainty that you're good at it. And that, yeah.
The thing that I do with people, and I don't know that I ever started doing this consciously. I think I just happened. I keep having to go back to this story thing. It's like, because if you're going to prepare somebody for an interview, they got to have their story down before the interview. So there's always this need to get this thing done. I've never bumped into anybody in 35 years who didn't need help with that. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Never, not once.
Interesting.
Some people are much better than other people, but most people do one of two things. They ramble, and
Yep.
at the end of their rambling, you still have no idea what they do, or they do what I said earlier, is they say, I'm a director. I'm
Yeah.
like, neither one of those things means anything to me, and you don't
Interesting.
understand the
Yeah.
context of that.
Yeah.
And what I tell people is, I go, I think you should break it into three parts, and I think you should start with the biggest part. The biggest part is like what you can tell someone when you're in an interview. So you have
Yeah.
like 45 minutes. So get out a couple of pages and just brain dump, right?
Mhm.
Then the other one is the elevator pitch, which is the one where you have like however long it takes an elevator to get 6 floors up. It's usually 30 to 60 seconds. So that
Yeah.
one's that's a few sentences, and those sentences are in the bigger narrative.
Hmm.
And then the last one you need is like 2 or 3 words. Like if I and that's the tagline. And I say, think about it like that. Build the big one, pull a few sentences out of the big one for the elevator pitch, and then pull a couple of words out of there. Because the taglines, I mean, Nike, just do it. That doesn't, what does that mean? Right? Finger licking good. It's associated with your brand, but it's not necessarily a direct phrase. And at that, when you contextualize it like that, I think it makes it easier for people to get started, you know?
Yeah. But going back to each other, right? So I realized after fumbling around the first few times, I started to lead with, I'm an inventor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I tried that one out a few times because it's true. I'm an inventor. I have 5 patents, um, and then I can keep going about what they are. Or I'm again because I have 5. That's the other one I was trying. Well, I have 5 different projects, and then you go there. But the first thing that comes out of your mouth is really important, not just for them, but for
Mm-hmm.
yourself, because you're
Yep.
going to set the stage to how they react to go on to the next ones, right? And
Yeah, I
but
think
yeah,
I
like
would.
even just I'm gonna pick on you for a second. When I asked you what you did, it took it you didn't it took a while. You
Mhm.
didn't say I'm a career coach.
And I'll give you context on that because I think that I've played around with this, my identity professionally, ever since I didn't no longer had my own company,
Yeah,
and I was out on my own as a solopreneur, if you will,
yeah.
doing most of the work myself, and I became way more than that. And that almost became an insult to me. I'm a career coach. Like, I don't think you can say, I don't feel like I can say that.
I appreciate you saying that. So then what have you done? What can you do so you don't say that? You got to you got to replace it with something. You got to say something. You could say I
Well,
do.
yeah, I think what I'm wrestling with, and this is a testament to how difficult this is you and I are
Yeah,
struggling
it
with it
is.
as we speak,
Yeah.
and we should probably be better than most at this. Um, but yeah, it's professional development, with a leadership development, bent to it that's been recent. I'm formalizing that, and but it's all around professional development, getting better in your career, changing careers, transitioning, new jobs, promotions.
Then you could say I'm in the professional development uh, industry work. I
Hmm.
do professional development work,
Yep.
and then that goes into consulting. The consulting you do could go even into your podcasting. You could go into the other things you do, but
It's a good runway for, yeah, it's a good runway.
yeah,
And that's what
yeah.
the coaching, the coach word is just,
It's overused.
it's
I totally agree
overused,
with you on that one. Yeah.
misused. Yeah. And
Like consultant's kind of overused too. That's why I led with that one a few times, but it's not one I want to. Consultant is usually a guy that doesn't have a job. That's usually what that means.
yeah, unemployed. Yeah, no,
Unemployment.
I like the inventor thing because you can attach technology to that.
Yeah.
You can attach cabinet making to that. You can attach entrepreneurship and selling
Yes.
cabinets to that. It's a nice runway for you as well.
Yeah. Well, I see. I try. Used to try. I do innovation, but that's kind of too broad. If I say inventor, because I have invented things and then uh, receive patents on them or license them, then I could speak to that
Hmm.
area. And like you said, then I've been, and this took me a while. This is recently. Then I can branch out to these other areas of my inventions and even the project that I'm doing now because they're kind of related. So it takes some work, I have to say.
It does, and one of the things I was thinking about is I may deploy one of the techniques that you're describing here. I think
Yeah,
I might put a time limit on this exercise when I initiate it with my next client, and just say,
yeah,
"Let's do this. You got 5 minutes. I'm going to hit my timer, and I'll tell you when 5 minutes is up. Go."
yeah,
Because I think that pressure is beneficial. There's a phrase for, if you give someone 2 hours to do something, they'll do it in 2 hours. If you give
yeah,
them 90 minutes, they'll get it done in 90
yeah,
minutes. That's a human condition. I can't
yeah,
remember what the phrase is for it, but
yeah,
I think that you're right. I think the time constraint made that exercise more fruitful, probably for more enjoyable
yeah.
too.
Yeah, here's another takeaway, Mark. In the beginning, I started doing it because I was concerned what they thought of me. Right. And I think we all do that, right?
Yep.
I'm gonna say this, and they're gonna judge me. Then of course they're gonna judge you. That's why they're asking you, right?
Hmm.
That's the exercise is about. But then I started to get more clear about how once I got the right language, the right vocabulary, then I also became better at describing what it is I do, and they became more interested because I was
Right.
more specific
That's
about
right.
it.
That's
And it's
right.
interesting that you picked up on the inventor part because I was able to eventually. Um, Apply that to the other all the things I do. Even the podcast that we're doing has there's some invention to it, right? There's framework that was created
Hmm.
in order that we use every week. That's part of inventing or invention or innovation. So
Hmm. Hmm.
interesting you picked up on that. But yeah,
Yeah.
kind of going back to yours, uh, it's same thing, right? If you're in professional development, everybody wants to be professionally developed. So you right away they're interested in hearing from. I don't care who they are, right? So
Yeah, I think it is a profession I found, I guess, much like doctors, when doctor, you're at a cocktail party and
yeah,
somebody finds out you're a doctor, they're like, hey, take a look at my elbow, will you? It's just like, it's like, hey, I need some professional advice. I'm like,
yeah.
yeah, I bet you do.
So here's another way to look at it, Mark. It's not the person that you're actually okay. You've convinced them of who you are and what you do, right? It's how they introduce you.
Yeah,
That's the one because they say, "Oh, Jim, that inventor guy."
yeah,
Or
yeah,
that I don't know what he does. I don't know. I think he's in the cabinet business. I don't know. I don't really know what
yeah,
the guy does, right?
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
so
it's
they give it that way too. It's not what how you describe what you do. It's how other describes what you do. And
Yeah,
what you
no,
do
that's a very good point, and it might
yeah,
even be an interesting question if you wanted somebody's assistant. Say, well, how would you describe me to someone else? Well,
that's right.
in a
Yeah.
professional
Yeah.
manner, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, that's next level stuff though. But it really yeah, it is yeah, because again, later in the event, then if somebody you've met them, now you kind of like everybody can knows feels like they know each other because they do. They know each other much better than they did had you never had that exercise of
It's a
4 minute
great exercise, man.
drill.
It's a great way to kick off a
Uh,
networking event because
yeah,
most of those networking events, I don't go to them because most of them people are just walking around handing out cards and saying stupid shit. But
yeah,
that's a great way to get to throw some gas on the fire of a networking thing. The other
yeah. They
thing
had a
that
few beers laid out there, some
yeah,
cocktails too. That kind of
that that
lubricated the
that
conversations, you know.
that helps some of us. Yes,
Yeah,
it helps.
yeah,
Yeah. No, the other thing that I think that I think the takeaway for me, for anyone listening, would be if you're not crafting your story like a little bit all the time, but maybe one nice, solid, focused energy exercise with a mirror and a tape recorder and an objective third party, ideally. But it's something to practice. I think it would make you better in negotiations. It would make you better in dealing with any vendors that might be in your life at your home. It might be beneficial to your relationships, friendships. I don't think there's a downside. I think if you can't really answer the question, what do you do to your own liking, then I think probably is worthy of some time and attention. And one of the words that I would throw out there, if you're guiding North Star, from my experience, would be clarity.
yeah.
Is it clear, right? Because if you get it clear, I think the rest of it's much easier. But clarity is a very difficult thing to arrive at when you're describing something you know very well to
Mhm.
someone who doesn't know anything about it.
Right,
You know?
right. Yeah, because everything that everybody does is complex. So to narrow that down to something that the average person could at least understand enough to be interested, or at least understand enough to not be interested, which would be fine too. I'll
Mm-hmm.
share kind of an ending and as we wrap up, but and I'll speak to my about my father, which is an interesting relationship, you know, after their passing. Right now it's been a few years now, almost 5 years now. And and so for, you know, my majority of my life, all I knew him is what he said he did, or what his title was, and his title turned out to be so different than what he actually did. Um, his he would ask people, and people, what do you do? And he said, I'm an electronic technician. Well, maybe that was his job title in 1950 or whenever he took his first job or something. But later on, he was part of the team that built the technology that for radiation at the Lawrence Livermore Berkeley lab. So that's
Mm.
well, Livermore Berkeley lab is one of the same. It's the Brad lab, but it changed it changed the medical devices forever, right? It picked up
Hmm.
radiation. He was on the team. He built the actual equipment. A lot of this came out later on in his life. He was he was terrible about telling explaining it because it was so complex and was so ahead of
Hmm.
its time.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but now that I'm learning more about the impact that had on the world and how it changed the world, and even during that time period, I could tell his story way better than he can tell his own story.
Oh,
But
it's I heard that that's very interesting on
yeah,
a number of levels. And your dad and my dad as well also grew up in a generation that was not told not to brag. Was told
yeah,
not to brag, and now my father was adamant about us not answering the question, "What does your dad do for a living?" He didn't want us telling anybody. Like if they
That's
really,
interesting, huh? What the kind of the opposite, right? I know he was a pilot, and
yeah,
you've shared this with me before, but in his case, he didn't want people to know what he does.
no, he
And
thought
what a different world, right? Right. What we're talking about, we're trying to convince people what you do. Airline pilot's a pretty easy one because it comes with a lot of uh, honor, right?
well, but it also comes with, yeah, well, you're probably a drunk and a philanderer too, right?
I don't know. I don't. I see pilots as that's. I think to be a pilot, it requires a lot of uh, discipline, a lot of course, education. But
I've been
I
around.
didn't know that. I didn't know pilots were known for.
I've been around a lot of pilots and fighter pilots and commercial pilots and my brother's squadron and everything. But I think this to stay on topic, I think the story is, and I had to fight some of that too when I was starting to try and brand myself and get my voice out there. And there's a component of that that's kind of braggadocious, and it fucks with my head every once in a while. It's like, who the hell are you to thinking you can give advice to anybody? You don't even, you got to get your own shit together,
Yeah.
and there's that voice doesn't go away. You can quiet it, and I'm pretty good at making it quiet quickly now, but it comes back whenever it wants.
Yeah.
And I think that when you're trying to tell your story, yeah, I'd go with the word clarity. I think if your goal is clarity, you'll get where you want to be quicker. But
Mhm.
I think everybody, and I think recording it and listening to it is a very powerful thing to do as well, because we don't know what we sound like. I mean, I know what I sound like now because you and I have been doing this for a while. But and I've had people tell me, you've got a radio voice, or you got a good voice, or you got a nice deep voice, or it's like I don't necessarily hear what other people hear. So I think having a recording of it and listening back to it is probably a good exercise in that space.
Yeah, I don't know about that. That could be a complete mind fuck too. Listen to yourself talk.
Did you
I,
ever did you ever watch tape of yourself play?
not that much. No, because you remember it was a time when it wasn't video wasn't available
I
the same
know.
way
I'm
it
thinking
was.
to myself, I'm thinking of I never, nobody ever took a video of me swinging a bat or hitting a golf ball or shooting a
No.
basketball. Like that's all they do now is watch film,
Oh
you
yeah.
know?
Yeah,
So
it's a very different
maybe,
yeah, that's a whole other thing. I think recording yourself in that's definitely kind of next level stuff. But the language, the words, getting really comfortable in your mind that what you do and who you do it for, and you do it well. I think it's training your mind eh, to express a level of confidence and certainty for whatever it is you do, and that takes a
mhm,
little bit of work. And I don't think
it
that's a one
does.
man job. I really don't.
No, I agree. I agree with you. I agree
Yeah.
with you. Well, let's
Yeah.
go off and work on our respective stories. Maybe we do it better next time around.
All right, Mark. All
Thanks,
right.
Jim.
All right. Till next
See you,
time.
man.
See you.